I'm feeling much better. Oh, looks like we're on. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I've just been joined by the Honorable Gary Hopper.
Let's see if I'm in the center. I'm out of center.
Norm just gave us a round of applause. Gary, would you like a cookie?
I don't know what's in it. Hey, Norm, what's in the cookie?
He wouldn't tell me. All I know is.
No nuts?
I didn't see nuts, no.
Oh, I don't think there's nuts in the cookie.
If I
think
die
just chocolate chips.
Oh, to be on. That could be our best cotton picking rating show ever if I actually die on screen.
That'd be some good
All right,
publicity.
let's do that.
Just break it open first. Make sure there's no nuts in it.
Station on TV.
Huh?
We had somebody
Shoot.
died. Well, yeah, never mind. Do your show.
Wow, Joe just started to tell us a really interesting story. Apparently, someone died on TV once. Here, that's interesting. Anyway,
I don't know if that's a euphemism for something or not.
I don't know.
I forgot my hand grenade.
So our guest is late.
Yeah, well, we went late in the legislature. I just bailed out early.
Did you?
Yeah.
What have you got there?
Oh. I don't know. No, this is a list of bills that we went through. Well, not all of them, but a lot of the bills we went through today.
Yeah.
I just brought it to remind me. What is that? The Inquirer thing you got over there anyway.
This is it's the New Hampshire Herald, and
What's this out?
this is Chris Anu, who no doubt considers himself a modern day Edward R. Murrow. And our guest is here.
Standing downstairs.
Oh,
I kept ringing and ringing and ringing.
the doorman
really?
was supposed to bring you up.
Well, he wasn't there.
But in pursuit of truth and reason is their tagline, and this is actually part two. Part one came out a few weeks ago of an exclusive interview with Larry Sinclair. Larry Sinclair versus Obama, the untold story.
What's it all about?
And it says that Larry Sinclair says he didn't only do drugs with Obama, but also there is evidence that the president was once bisexual. Story on page 9.
Oh yeah, I think I've seen that guy on Facebook, on YouTube.
Larry
Come on,
Sinclair?
Come on over, Frank.
So, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is State Representative Frank Saporetto, formerly Senator. You got demoted.
We gotta get you in front of that mic.
Yeah.
You got to pull that kind of close to you too.
Okay.
We have cookies.
Thanks.
Don't you trust us?
Well, I'm on a diet. I'm doing my diet thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's something I should be doing again. I keep going up and down. I go to 210, then back down to 180, then 210, back down to 180, but whatever.
Yeah, I just have different suits that fit for different weights.
That's right.
There you
that's
go.
Right. But anyway, let's see what's going. So anyway, so that guy, why is that newsworthy? That guy's been on YouTube for years saying that he had sex with the president.
Well, you know what's funny is an issue of this came out several weeks ago, and I read some of it on Norm and Friends, some of the interview. And then finally, this used to be a weekly thing, but finally he puts out the follow-up issue with part 2 of the interview. And I'm noticing it's a lot lighter and a lot thinner. I think a lot of advertisers pulled out.
Oh, really?
After part 1, yeah.
Wow.
Because this is pretty tabloidish stuff.
Yeah,
Personally, I'm shocked.
Yeah. Personally,
Well, I'm not. I went to the Secretary of State's office and I looked up the petition they had, and an affidavit from the Social Security Administration said that Obama's Social Security number on the filing was fraudulent. This is from the Social Security Administration. It says it right on the filing form.
But is there anything there that says he was once bisexual?
No, I'm sure there's plenty more.
Well, see, Chris Anu has the story
Well,
here.
I think there's a lot of people at that when they're younger are trisexual. So
Yes. Try anything. Yeah.
They'll try anything.
Yeah,
sexual.
I had the dogs and
Yeah.
cats too.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh my. Ooh, scandalous. Scandalous.
Okay, so what do we do? What fun things do we do today, Frank? We passed
Well,
two
for-
CACRs. One to say that we had to get out of the
United Nations,
United
to
Nations
NAFTA,
and NAFTA.
quite a few things.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, before you pass that, one of the big issues, of course, too, we've been talking about the gay marriage issue.
Yes.
And under the last bill, I just had a lobbyist approach me at the end of the day. We discussed what the committee of conference was when they did pass that law. And under that law, since the church has the exclusive authority to marry,
Yeah.
that too, then the church of polygamy would be recognized as well. And they refused to take the question that they're unaware that polygamy is now illegal in New Hampshire. Since the pastor, when they passed the law, the concern was they didn't want to have clergymen have to perform a service that was against and violation of their faith.
Correct.
So as a result, the Committee of Conference agreed on the language reading that the church, whatever recognized church it is, shall have the exclusive authority, instead of the legislation now, the exclusive authority of the courts to marry anyone. So as a result, from that too, now that with a stroke of that, it made polygamy legal. Now, when the question came up to say, well, did you mean to include polygamy, the Committee of Conference refused to take the question. Because I think they know they made that error in there, and now that it's now precedent, and of course, that's what the law is right now.
Oh, that's interesting. But federally, polygamy is illegal, right?
I
Well,
believe so.
Brigham and Young had that, but then again, of course, the issue on the freedom to marry issue would be, we may supersede that. But it's left to the states right now as far as the recognition is, and where New Hampshire
Right.
is an issue. Because as you know, I co-sponsored a bill that's been coming under a lot of fire.
Yeah, we were just talking about it in the last show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've gotten hate mail. I mean, this is, people who are trying to preach and love, that we're supposed to be the ones doing hate legislation. I can tell you, I've had the nastiest messages from the most hateful people in the world, it must be, against, that really don't want people to have religious freedom. They insist that, for example, a Jewish catering service must serve pork at a Christian service. Or maybe a gay photographer that only does same-sex weddings now must do heterosexual marriages. And of course the bill just states that, if it's a violation of your faith or your conscience, the government can't compel you to act in such a manner.
Right.
And now the sponsors of the bill are going to withdraw the bill now because
What?
they're withdrawing the bill.
Oh,
I
really?
No,
thought
you're
that was
not on
Representative
that bill,
Bergman.
right?
I am on the bill. I'm a
Okay.
co-sponsor on the bill, and I don't want that bill withdrawn. I strongly believe in those religious freedoms. Anyone should be able to practice their faith in any way they seem fit. And there isn't even a mention of gay or anything to do with the bill, but the press, of course, being very sensational. And I guess the organization there that writes for the Union of Lesbian and Gay Writers and Guild Writers, they've made a big issue out of this. They put the Drudge Report, and I've been getting calls from Toronto and Los Angeles and New York, on why is this hate legislation? There's no hate in this legislation. This is about freedoms. This is about the reason why our country was founded, for religious freedom, to exercise your religious
So-
rights in any way you want.
So the bill's being,
It's going to be gutted. It's going to be withdrawn, and they're going to put in some, I believe, Representative Manous is going to add some religious faction to this bill that's going to deal with abortions or something, and not anything with the intent of the original bill.
wow.
Now let me ask you, because here's this is relatively new to me. I just learned about this in the last couple of days. And here is my concern. With this, if this were to become law, and we actually talked about this briefly on the last show, my concern when I hear this is, does it take us down a road where, say, a restaurant owner has someone come in who he may know or suspect to be gay?
This deals only with weddings and marriages, by the way.
Oh, it is that specific?
Oh, it's very specific.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize
we
that.
thought
Okay.
in the legislature's wisdom a few years ago, we exempted clergymen from this because we don't have to violate their faith. But I put to the clergymen are not the only people who are religious.
Right.
I'm not.
Right.
I'm not religious or bigoted at all the things that people are calling me for. And I will defend to the death someone's right to disagree, and that's what this is about.
Right.
The right to be able to disagree specifically on the issues that you hold dearest to your heart, your religion,
Sure,
your faith.
sure.
And now the government is going to compel you to act against your faith, and I believe that's just wrong, and we should fight that fight.
Yeah, because I think this is an offshoot. I think it was Arizona, that lady who had a photographer who was asked to do a gay marriage, and she says, I'm a Christian, I can't do that. She
yeah.
was taken to court. I think
There are
she
4 pending cases right now as we speak. One in Arizona, I believe the one you're talking about, one in Hawaii, another one in Vermont, and there's a 4th one.
Right.
Where the people are forced to act against their faith and religion, and they refuse to do so.
Yeah, and that's violating their constitutional rights right there, really.
But of course, the hot button now is protected classes. There's always some protected class that we must pass, some special legislation that grants them greater rights than the next American. Right now it happens to be gay and lesbians.
Yep.
40 years ago, it was blacks and whites. 80 years ago, it was women. It was gender. And in the 1880s, it was polygamy, if you want to go get right down to Utah and Brigham Young. Right. So, these things have always gone on. But my concern is that as we create more and more and more protective classes, and they have more and more rights than the rest of us do, then what happens? There are no more rights left. And we keep creating these. 40 years from now, what will the next issue be? So, I think this is a line in the sand saying, fine, practice, do what you like to do, live your life the way you want, have all the same privileges, rights, and things that you want to have, that's fine.
Right.
But leave others alone to practice their religion in peace. They want to do that. They're not compelled to. If you're a business owner and you work you're a baker, and you work 50 years and you bust your butt to build that business, now you're going to have, and a couple comes in, they claim just because you don't want, it violates your faith, you don't want to serve, provide services for that wedding, and now you can lose your entire business and your life savings all over that just to exercise a religious freedom,
Right.
and that's wrong.
So that's all this bill was. I mean, just to clarify, this deals with weddings and.
Only deals with weddings.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
Right. Religious ceremonies, the ability to opt out, to decline, to say, I'm sorry, I don't want to participate. And now, the way the law reads now, you can be prosecuted. That's
Wow,
wrong.
no kidding. Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah. Once you say that, make it illegal to discriminate against somebody based on their sexual origin, and then you pass a law that says marriage is legal, gay marriage is legal, then obviously you're violating their civil rights by not providing a service that violates your civil rights.
How many times you walked in a restaurant and you've seen the sign, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone?
Right.
Do you question why? I mean, I remember as a kid going up to camp up in North Conway to campground. I was 28 years old. He refused to rent us a campground based on our age. Is that discrimination?
Of course it is.
What about a bar? You go into a bar and what happens if after a wedding? I'll use the gay example too.
When I say, of course, I think they are discriminating whether it should be legal.
Sure.
Discriminating just means you are deciding between A and B, and you would just,
How about you and I got married, Gary? Let's say we're going to
Not
go
again. After the last time, there's no freaking way, dude.
Let's say we did that. We go downstairs after the wedding. We go down to a bar, and someone refused to serve us. Now we might have had about 20 drinks in us. We probably shouldn't be served. But it's wonderful that we can now prosecute that bar owner and we can claim discrimination on that.
Right.
When it
You know,
had nothing to do with.
Right, exactly,
Right,
because
yeah.
all you need to do, because we're talking about thoughts, we want to punish people for their thoughts. We want to legislate morality, and that's wrong. You can't do that. And they liken this issue to the Jim Crow laws of the South. Those dealt with public institutions, segregation of schools,
Right.
and public tax dollars. Absolutely wrong. Of course it's wrong. And it's about race, not about religion.
Right.
This is a totally different animal, but now if you read the headlines, it's the spin on it. If you really
Yeah.
want to get it going, you got to get that spin, and you got to add gay, lesbian, and that'll get people riled up.
Well, race was a completely different thing, only by virtue of the fact that it was a physical attribute that was obvious. Also, somebody comes into your store and they're black. Well, you can tell.
Yeah, but I might disagree with that. And it's not good for business to refuse business.
Right.
So the market will correct itself in these things. They're not going to be in business very long if they're refusing business.
Right.
But like I said, the example of the gay photographer, the same-sex weddings now being forced to do other weddings. You can't specialize in things now because you'll be called discriminatory.
Right.
We're limiting, and we're thinking we're creating more freedoms. We're not. We're eliminating them, and we haven't drawn that line. And every year, more and more protected classes, it becomes more of an issue. Where now these are special classes that special laws apply to them and not to you or I.
Yep. No, I
So, I mean,
agree.
these things need to
Now,
be...
why are you withdrawing that?
I'm not withdrawing it. Representative Bergevin here wants to because he doesn't feel it's going to pass.
Well,
And
so
as you and I know, we've fallen on our sword a few times over the years.
So he doesn't want to
So-
take. He doesn't want to take the heat.
No, but I don't mind going down on the side of right. I'll do that. I'm happy to bring this issue
That's
to light.
funny that he's backing down because he and I both have a bill into one of my things that has bothered me, and I'm not sure you agree with me or Matt agrees with me, but I've got a bill in, and I'm trying to get the wording right, and it's really, really tough, is to require schools to teach the flaws in the theory of evolution. Okay? Because if you look at the theory of evolution, it isn't ironclad, but they teach it as if it is. I'll give you an example. Everybody knows about Lucy.
Lucy in the Bible.
No, Lucy in the theory of evolution, and one of their evidence was they found Lucy in Africa.
Oh, Neanderthal. You talk about Cro-Magnon Neanderthal, the skeleton.
Crow, yeah, sure,
Cro-Magnon,
wicked
yep.
hot chick. But anyway,
You guys know more about this than I do.
Well, I don't go for older women like he does. But
Oh,
that's
right.
all
Yeah, I understand. Yes.
we were old enough, we were there.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah,
so
we
you guys
were.
know. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, Lucy is one of their pillars of the evidence of evolution, because it was a link because Lucy walked upright. Okay, which is the difference between an ape and a human, is is vertical. Well, it didn't come out till years later. They started looking at the bones for the cervix and stuff like that, and it couldn't have been a human because of the size. So after a while, they realized Lucy probably wasn't even Lucy. It was more like Luke, and the way the body was shaped and stuff like that, the legs, she couldn't have been walking upright. And it goes on and on and on and on. And the original founder of Lucy finally admitted that, you know, he was so excited to find it. He said it's one of those almost like a self-fulfilling desire. You so much want to find it, you start putting that you almost twist your own mind and putting things in the wrong
See
place.
what you want to see.
So this one piece of evidence about evolution, one of the huge piece of evidence, is not true, and it's still in the books.
But don't they teach it? See, I thought that is how they taught it, though.
No,
Because I always hear that phrase, theory of evolution. I rarely hear just
That's the way
evolution.
I was taken as just a theory. And,
Yeah.
and
No,
same
that's
with
how I was taught, right.
Darwinism and all the others were all done as theory.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not go back to 1920s. We'll go back to the case of creationism. But yeah, I have no problem with them reporting what's true.
Yeah.
I try not to get into the specifics of curricula. The small.
tough.
You're right. The only one I got into, as you were there 2 years ago, was the Pledge of Allegiance bill, which didn't deal with curricula, but dealt with the ability to
was
say
2
Pledge
years
of
ago?
Allegiance. 10 years ago now.
Yeah, 10 years ago.
Yeah, I
'cause
was the prime
looking-
sponsor in that, and it was killed twice in committee. You know,
Right.
and all the bill said was that every child in the state of New Hampshire should have the opportunity to say Pledge of Allegiance if they wanted to. Oh, and the ACLU fought me tooth and nail on it, and the others, of course,
Really?
Oh, of course,
Yeah.
you can't be having that happening.
no,
And
no.
along with the bill, it also said that if you didn't want to say it, which is fine, you should stand, and that's what they objected about.
Oh,
They had
really?
such a big deal about that, and I said, well, I can think of a time when the government, if you fail to stand, you're subject to incarceration.
Sure.
You can be
Judge?
absolutely. And I said, well, we're going to take you to court. The ACLU said, fine. Let's find out why we should stand for the judge walking the court, but not for the symbol of our country.
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
Remember
That was 2001 or 2.
And Alf Jacobson, the co-sponsor, here's the sad thing, Gary, is that every co-sponsor on that bill is dead now, and every one of them was a veteran of a major battle in the Pacific in World War II. Remember when Alf Jacobson told his story to the Education Committee of landing on Iwo Jima, just before that, the ACLU had been trying to explain that we don't pledge allegiance to the flag, we pledge it to our Constitution. And Representative Jacobson, the belated, much loved. He was a wonderful legislator. I mean,
Yeah.
we lost a treasure when he passed away recently.
Yeah,
He got up
was
and he
pretty
said,
cool.
when I got to Suribachi, when I landed on the beach in Okinawa, and he says, I watched the flag go up over Suribachi. And he says, as I watched it go up, he says, that was America. I pledged my allegiance to that piece of ground. And as my friends were being killed all around me, that was a piece of my country.
Right.
And I could never put it the eloquent way that he did it.
Yeah.
He could say it, but I mean, the meaning before that was really there. And the arguments against, the civics being taught in schools and so forth, that he really explained that 15 seconds it takes to say the Pledge of Allegiance is more of a civics lesson, could get more interest in the issues and what they had done than almost any other curriculum we could put in. That's why it was important to pass that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of bills like that have been killed since you and I have been up there. It's
Yeah.
been a long time.
Do they not say the pledge in school now in New Hampshire?
40% were not doing so at that time, and now I
Really?
guess it's growing. I'm
Probably
hearing.
since 9/11. Oh, I bet you did that. Yeah, you did that before.
I did it right
9/11.
after 9/11, but I did
Right
it
after?
before in God was an issue. It was, it was
Sure.
an issue about being God.
Right.
And the only place that objected to doing it after we passed the bill was Hanover and Henniker. So I went, Hanover and Durham, rather.
Okay.
So they didn't know. They had a meeting up in Hanover where the student council had it, and there was about 200 people showed up there. And there was law enforcement, and there was ex-military there, guys, and the student council was running it, and they were appalled that they would have to be brainwashed. They likened it to Nazism.
No
They were
kidding.
brainwashing people to say Pledge of Allegiance. They didn't need to do that. And 2 ROTC kids got up there, and they said, we don't need to demonstrate our commitment to our country. Obviously, we're committed. We don't need to say Pledge of Allegiance every day. day. And then I stood up, I says, well, you're all assuming all the things why this bill was written. Well, I wrote the bill, and I can tell you why. And I said to the boy, I says, how many times did you tell your mother you love her? Told just once? You know, and there was just silence. And I says, if it wasn't for these heroes behind me, these gentlemen behind me, these are veterans of World War II, I said, you're probably speaking German now. And a woman in the back of the crowd starts shrieking how offensive that was. Now,
Really?
in other words, she's their civics teacher.
No kidding. Wow.
We wonder why we have these skewed views.
Right.
We can't repay what those men did. We don't even understand what they went through for us to be there to have that discussion.
Yeah.
And here they are teaching, that it was just chopped liver.
That's amazing.
It's incredible, how ungrateful, some of these people, really feel about that and how they try to separate, the deeds that they did. I spent last summer, I went to Normandy. I spent 5 days
Wait,
going over.
before I forget, my mother said when she watches this online, the advertisement goes across where the phone number is. So once in a while, if you can actually read that phone number, I can't read it.
Oh, yeah. It's 603-413-0223 if you'd like to call in.
Okay.
603-413-0223. So your mom watches the show?
Yeah.
Excellent.
She's crazy.
You
But
can only see the number if you're watching at home. You can't see it there.
Right.
I don't know where you were reading.
Yeah, I just have it memorized because I've been
Oh,
for a while.
yeah, no, at home, when she's watching at home, there's like a advertisement that goes across.
When she
it.
watches online.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when she watches it online. Anyway, sorry, Frank.
Oh, that's fine. No, I had. No, I wanted to go back and see what many of our colleagues, had talked about, and go back to Arromanches and all those places in Normandy. So
Yeah,
for
yeah.
me, that was a very moving experience. Then,
Yeah,
I
we had-
was honored to take colors down in the American Cemetery that evening, and it was very touching to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know my, like I think I told you, we have a guy at church who is landed on Normandy. And he's pretty short. And he got off the landing craft, and he, right down into the water. And
Yep.
some of the guys were just taller than him, picked him up and pushed him on.
Yes, I remember he did tell me that story.
Yeah.
That's right, I heard that too. I stood on that beach walking out of there, and you could see where the rows of 20 millimeters, the 40 millimeters, and everything behind them. I mean, it was like a giant firing squad with 200 yards of nothing to hide. I mean, just out in the open. The bravery
Wow.
it's beyond description.
They still
what
have
went through.
the gun emplacements where the Germans sat there and just picked them up.
Oh,
like-
they have all of them there. They have one they have 4 in a row. One in pristine condition. The other one had a gun duel with the Indiana. You can see what happens when 88 has a gun duel with a with a cruiser. And they showed what happens: a 6-inch shell versus a 10-inch shell versus a 14-inch shell hits the concrete. I mean, it's just.
Wow.
It's unbelievable what they did, and of course the remnants of Mulberry Bay are still there too, outside of Arromanches. You can walk
Now
in.
you go back up. What's Mulberry Bay? I'm not that.
Mulberry
familiar
Bay
with-
was one of the 2 manufactured landing places they had. They brought in these heavy 60,000-ton caissons, the concrete that they made in England. They floated them across the channel. They sank them to make a breakwater so they could do a landing. Because
Right.
all the equipment came across over about a half a mile, maybe a quarter mile to a half mile out, quite a ways out, and walked along the engineered-made bridge. And then a week after the landing, a huge storm came up and destroyed one of the 2, destroyed the American landing zone, and they only had 1 left, right outside of Arromanches. But they were able to get all the equipment. And now when you go there, you can hardly find, I think there's 1 Sherman tank in Wolfboro, and there might be 1 or 2 other here. All this equipment is all over France. When you go up
really?
when you go along the coast to do the what's called the Operation Overlord trail, you see a ton, so much American equipment. It's everywhere. Half tracks, the tanks,
Yeah.
even the British landing zone has their British tanks, and I mean all the equipment is still there.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
A lot of it, and you can see the outline of the Mulberry Bay that's still left there too. But the embankments are still there. And of course they went to the German cemetery and the American cemetery. What I found most interesting was that at the 63,000 heroes that are buried at the American cemetery, guess how many of them won the Congressional Medal of Honor? Remember, these are the heroes that landed on the
Right.
beach, and then the 63,000 American soldiers there.
I'd say probably a dozen or 2.
3. And one of them is Teddy Roosevelt's son.
Oh, no
too.
kidding.
Oh, it's a very moving experience. The cemetery itself is so beautiful. Everything is kept first class. There's about 10 gardeners that will walk and cut 1 blade of grass at a time, and they move from grave to grave perpetually. Just
kidding.
keeping it all perfectly manicured.
Wow.
It's just if you ever watched the movie Saving Private Ryan, and you look at the very end of the movie, and you see him kneeling down, you see a Captain Miller on the stone. Look at all the other stones in the background. They're all blank. Spielberg put in Steven Spielberg put in a fake row, and where Captain Miller was, and so that's why they're all blanking to the side.
okay.
But what he didn't know was that after they finished filming, the director of the cemetery took him around and showed him the real stone on the other side of the fake Captain Miller one,
Yeah.
and it was Miller.
No kidding.
Wow.
He says a lot of strange things like that had happened. And he also said that the last D-Day observance, there were only 16 veterans from D-Day that were there at the
It's not
service.
that many
That's how many
left.
left,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, I mean, like, the gentleman at my church is, you know, I was thinking of having him on the show, but he has a real hard time hearing. So I think it would be, you know, he's got all his faculties except the fact that he can't hear too well, so I don't know how that would work out.
There was somebody from Manchester, last January, a year ago from now, we gave honor to Walter Borowski, who was one of the last surviving Rangers, the heroes of Point Du Hoc. Now, Point Du Hoc was the toughest place to scale.
Now, what was this one?
Point Du Hoc was the Rangers. There were 330 Rangers approximately, or 390 Rangers that scaled these cliffs. And only
Now, this is on D-Day.
on D-Day, right.
they
The
went in-
worst part, the cliffs themselves, where they had the rocket-propelled grenades that came up. You know, it was in the movie, you know, in The Longest Day. They showed them. And he went back and forth where the rocket went, and where they were cutting the ropes and letting our soldiers fall off the cliffs. And there were hundreds of German soldiers at the top with a barbed wire, and you could see, if you stand over the top and look down, it's just like a killing field. They can't get you, and you could pick them all off.
Yeah.
And they were able to scale that and capture that position. Amazing.
Wow.
They did. When you go there, the museums are dedicated to entire armies, you know, but there's one museum that's dedicated to a group of guys, and that's these Rangers. And when I went into the museum to explain that, well, we just had a service for, we just gotten the French Legion of Honor, he was unable to make it over, and I'm sorry to say that he passed away in March. They had a moment of silence for him in the museum, and there's only one of those Rangers still left alive today, according to the director of the museum. You know, but what they did was just beyond, was superhuman, what they
Yeah.
had to do. But anyway, the service that we had, there was a veteran from Manchester, and we had all the military there, and the French ambassador was there, and there was about 100 people in the Derry Town Hall, and there was a conversation between Walter Borowski and whoever the veteran was from Manchester, who was there at D-Day, and even the military had no idea what they were saying back and forth. It was some code or language they used from D-Day, and you could have heard a pin drop in that room. It was so eerie to listen to these two men after so many years speaking that code back and forth from their war days.
The
Amazing.
code. They had a code?
They had a way of speaking. I turned to the general who was there. I said, "What are they talking about?" He's, "No idea."
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, and they knew exactly what they were saying to each other. It was it's something that's lost, you know,
Yeah.
in time. But he had all his marbles there, and this guy was a true hero. So now we're trying to get one of our municipal buildings named after him, because those are the real heroes we need to honor. They're going all the time.
Well, that's one of the things that, and this is kind of a little deviation from that, is up at the State House now we have a lot of the Free Staters, the Libertarians. And to me, the Libertarians, they look at liberty and freedom as the ability or the freedom to do whatever they want.
Anything goes. Yeah.
Anything goes.
It's like the
And-
Wild West in their
and
world.
to me, what true liberty is, what true freedom is doing the right thing. Like these guys that are on Normandy, that wasn't. They didn't wake up that day and say, "Oh, what can I do today? I think I'll go get my brains blown out."
Right.
You know what I mean? They did what was necessary
Yes, they did.
for liberty. They fought for liberty. That's what, to me, liberty is the strength of character to fight for the right thing in spite of the fact that you may lose your own life doing it.
Yep. Yeah, and they were selfless in what they did.
Right.
You know, and courageous, and you know, I wonder if our generations can ever match that. That's why I think that they deserve the title of greatest generation.
Oh, they were the greatest generation because they made that sacrifice. Even the people who were home were, going down to the, local area and collecting their pots and their pans. They could be melted
Yep.
down for stuff. And,
Yep, kids all did that too. Newspapers and things,
Yep.
they all did that.
We don't do that. We're so,
There's a disconnect now.
Absolute
you
disconnect.
You can go entire days without even thinking about that we even have anybody overseas in Afghanistan or Iraq
Yeah.
now to a lesser degree. But
Yep.
Yep. I just spent, before I left for here, I had to listen to some stories from Representative Blankenbecker coming back from Afghanistan.
Oh, she got up and spoke this
No,
afternoon?
no, I wanted to listen. She told me some stories about what happened in Afghanistan and that too. And we think the rest of the world is like here, and it really isn't. As you know, I went to Pakistan about 8 years ago.
Oh,
in a
did you go
delegation.
with Qaeda?
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
I was
okay.
I was only senator, and there were 5 representatives, and we went to Kashmir, went to line of control. We had 127 commandos guarding us. We were at the
many?
barbed wire. 127. We were in a dangerous area.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how dangerous till after we got home. Put it this way: at one point, when we walk out of the hotel, I turn to Bob Guida and I tap him on the chest, and he's. Wow, did you gain some weight there? He's wearing a Kevlar vest.
No kidding. No kidding.
Nobody told me about a Kevlar vest. I'm a pretty big target. But luckily, we stayed safe, and they did a
You
good
thought
job
that
keeping us
maybe
safe.
there was something personal there, why they didn't tell you about the Kevlar?
I don't know what he did, but when he got pretty angry when I tapped him on him. I tapped him on that. It was a different world.
Yeah.
You drive by like women along the roads, they weren't allowed to look at you. Only the educated ones made a point to shake your hand and talk to you, and very different culture. And it isn't the bulk of them over there. It was just the small, the radical group.
Sure.
I remember one morning the CNN photographer asked for bacon eggs for breakfast, and we almost got a mob attack us.
Yeah.
We were even unaware.
Yeah.
We were
Right.
ignorant of that culture at the time when he said that. But it was,
Yeah.
and not to mention, I don't think there's a roll of toilet paper in the country. But that was difficult to get used to.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I know when on Facebook, when Representative Blackenbecker was over there, I told her, I actually did it on the show, was because she had said that still the biggest thing killing our guys was the and gals with the IEDs.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so I said I invented a IED detector.
Oh.
Well, what a lot of people don't know is that one of the creatures on this planet with a very, very profoundly good sense of smell is a pig. Okay?
Yes.
Because they use them to find truffles in, was it Italy?
Yes.
Right?
Very expensive with truffles.
Very expensive because they're like many feet under the ground. And so I came up with a picture. I called it war pigs, and you'd send them out ahead of the vehicles and stuff like that. And it would be an awesome idea and so politically incorrect. I think.
Yes. Yes.
It is. Political correctness is carried so far now that it's gone beyond.
It's getting absurd.
It's absurd. And that's
there's
where
the
we're
war
trying to
pig.
put those.
Yes.
We want to try to get that line drawn.
I hope you patented that.
I know. I should have.
Yeah, no, it happens, and I get it from the nasty messages I get on the machines. And,
Oh,
on
yeah.
some of these things. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah, it's
people
all
are
the time.
really, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I brought up the thing about the evolution, because I've been getting hate mail
Really?
from Canada, from Florida.
Oh yeah.
People they're wicked mad at me.
Once it hits the Drudge Report, it goes national. And that's
Yeah.
when it can go viral, and
Yeah.
it's insane. Today, one thing we talked about, what we did today. There was a series of bills that we've been getting contacted about. I'm sure you did as well. About 5 bills that were ridiculous. One reference to the Magna Carta. I mean, there were a number of strange bills.
Yeah.
Now these bills, just so the listeners know, there are 400 of us in the House. There's plenty of people to do plenty of things. I'm on Ways and Means. Almost all my time is taken up with tax issues.
Yeah.
But we're in 2 years. Not 100% of my time. There are things I care about too, rights and freedoms. But these 5 bills were put in, and they're ridiculous bills, and we know they're ridiculous bills.
Yeah.
And the people who put them in were, knew would never expect them to pass. We aren't spending any time on these bills.
Right.
So today, to make it a partisan issue, and because they're introduced by Republicans, the Democrats drew each one of them out, pulled them off of the consent calendar. I mean, in other words, we had done with them. We didn't spend any time on them.
Right.
And they insisted on spending hours on these bills
Really?
to try to use it against us in the next election. And that's what they're seeing, and this is the part of the the spin on things. Now,
Yeah.
they're introduced by Republicans, but they wanted to debate the bill. They wanted to do a roll call vote on these bills to find out who supported them. They wanted to
Yeah.
have pros and cons on all of them.
Well, what
and
kind
we had
of-
already gotten rid of them. We were done with them.
What kind of bills? I'm curious now.
One was the Magna Carta. One was.
Yeah, I
need
think all,
glasses, but-
all legislation or something had to refer back to its origins in the Magna Carta. Is that what
Yes, if it referred to those one, I know that one, the only one that stood out for me was Magna Carta. But there were about 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah.
And they were, one of them was dedicating it might have been following, not Arizona laws. That was a good one. But
That
there
was actually a good one.
Yeah, that
no,
was.
you're talking Shivo.
Oh, Terry Schiavo
Terry
issue,
Terry,
right?
Terry Schiavo. We're supposed to have a day to commemorate her.
Terry,
I
yeah,
don't know what it was.
and we had, that was, yeah, and I mean, all these things were.
They were dead on
They
the
were
line.
dead. They were already dead. They were
Yeah.
done. We didn't spend any time on them at all.
Yeah.
But because they're already introduced, I guess whatever the flash mailing was by the Democrats sent them all out to them, and they tried to make it an issue and drag it on in the legislature today. And we didn't put any time into it. They
Yeah.
put in 4 times as much on these ridiculous bills as any Republican did
Yeah.
in order to try to say, look at what the Republicans introduced.
No kidding.
So that's where you get an issue of partisan.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a deliberate attempt to make the opponents, the other side, look foolish. Which,
Right.
Right.
You know, but by the same tokens, the real difference is we had the Magna Carta bill. By the way, for people who don't know, the Magna Carta was written about 1300.
1297.
That's pretty
I
close.
saw that too.
Yeah.
I just saw that this summer too.
Okay,
by the way.
1297, and basically it was actually very cool because it was an agreement with the royalty and the people saying these are your fundamental rights. You have a right to a trial by your peers, and one of them, which is really kind of fun, is if you were like 15 and your dad died, okay, and until you reached the age, I think, of 18, you didn't have to pay the Jews interest until you reached it didn't accrue over that period of time until you became old enough to start paying it back.
Which I think is
Yes.
very fair.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You
Well,
know,
it was the first democratic document that spelled out rights.
yeah,
And it was,
and
it was
it's
the
actually
foundation of the Bill
really
of Rights.
a cool document.
is, yeah.
And it shouldn't be dismissed, but there are some pretty ridiculous things in it. And that we would think of as ridiculous now. Back
Right,
then,
right.
it
In
was
my
back then it
common
was.
sense.
yeah.
And the difference is we didn't spend any time on it except for which, like you said, what the Democrats wanted to spend on it to make us look ridiculous. The difference is last session, they had the bathroom bill,
Oh, yeah.
and it passed.
What's
Well,
the-
I recall the speaker coming off the podium to pass that. The bathroom bill said that anybody was allowed, and you could go into, a man could walk into a woman's room, or vice versa, with complete impunity. You could not ask them to leave. They had the right to be there regardless of their gender.
If they felt.
If they felt that they were in a woman's room, feminine side that day. If they felt that way. I know it's just laughable,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it was so much political capital spent on this that the speaker came off the podium, which is a rare event in order to vote on this, to go down and defend it on the floor. And of course, it was killed in the Senate.
Yeah.
But it passed the House because they had a
And the only
majority.
reason it was
Wow.
killed in the Senate is because it had so much bad press.
Oh, yeah.
They believe.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, if you look at legislation like that, its origin was not unreasonable. Okay, what it was there's certain things you can't legislate. And one of them is common sense. And common sense tells you if you have a little kid, and this is what it was really directed to. You have some little kids,
I think I know where this
and
is going.
everybody knows them or has seen them in school that are legitimately confused and for whatever reason. And what you do is you make accommodations. You can use they're embarrassed to go into the boys' room because they figure maybe they think they're going to get beat up.
Right.
Not an unreasonable fear.
Yeah.
So what you do is you make an accommodation for that child and say, look, you just go in the teacher's room. Don't make a big deal out of it. Well, we don't want you getting.
Something that really didn't need legislation. It
Right,
could have been done
right,
anyway.
yeah. Yeah.
But so once you write it into law,
Law, now it's.
now, not only does that a 14-year-old boy or 15-year-old boy get to walk into the girls' locker room, if the principal grabs him by his strap his neck and pulls him out of there, that's a hate crime.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
I was a few weeks ago, beginning of this month, I guess it was. I was sitting at a Goffstown Republican meeting.
Yeah.
And we were talking about some of the ridiculous bills, and Neil said they had the bathroom bill last year, but that failed. I said, no, Neil, it passed the House. He just shakes his head. I was right, but he just couldn't believe that. It was just insane. So, yes, there always are ridiculous bills. The difference is the Republicans kill them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to make everyone feel well, but they don't look at the unintended consequences.
Right.
You know, what about all the rest of everyone else who doesn't really want a man in their bathroom while
Right,
they're there?
exactly.
You know, I mean, you got to think of the other side of things.
Yeah.
And what 15-year-old boy doesn't want to go into the girls' locker room?
Right, exactly.
But you brought up this in Magna Carta. I have a bill in that's going to bring the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights back to the State House. They were stolen, well, not stolen, they were unauthorized. They were moved to the archives and put in a vault so that
Really?
the citizens of New Hampshire can't see it.
That's
and
strange.
we have a gem in those things. We can, and of course they're concerned about the preservation.
And talk about the New Hampshire ones.
Yes, the New Hampshire Declaration of Independence is actually in better condition than the one in Washington.
Oh.
You know, it's in the Bill of Rights too, which is worth a substantial amount of money. I believe that Bill Gardner, our Secretary of State, found them rolled up in a pipe about 30 years ago, 35
kidding.
years ago.
Really?
That's
Wow.
how they're very well preserved. He discovered them; they were lost for like 100 years, and he found them. So they were on display. So years ago, we built the special room in the State House with motion detectors and UV light protection and humidity controls and all the things you have
Yeah.
to store the documents in. And they remained there up until about 2006, I believe, when former the gift shop guy, Ken Leidner, when he left, had them removed. His last day on work, he called in archives, had them taken out from the elevator and out the back and removed over to archives without authorization.
Really?
So since then, the Senate presidents and House speakers have been trying to get it back, bring them back, but they're unable to do so. The Secretary of State won't release them. He's concerned with their safety.
Right.
But after going to the Louvre and finding out we upgraded a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, all the UV glass up to date. We can store documents for 1,000 years without any type of degradation.
Yeah.
We have everything built just specifically.
That's why
And
he's centered. He can actually pronounce degradation.
degradation, yeah.
Yes.
And it's all, and it's the room is and it's also the security is made for it. So now it has less security. It's not as safe where it is right now, and it's not on display. And the people of New Hampshire can't get to see those very important
How much
documents.
safe is it? Like, say somebody was going to think of like making money on this. What do you mean?
I don't make any money. It should just be
See the
able.
wheels turning in your head.
What I'm thinking is all the kids that come to the State House, we have schools go through there all the time.
Yep.
This
Yeah.
is where they go. They should be seeing these documents.
Absolutely.
That's what they're there for.
Yeah.
We can preserve them. That's why we made it that way.
Right.
But to hide these things away,
What
is
was his
wrong.
reason?
Well, again, he's concerned with the preservation of the documents.
Yeah.
The light. For example, when I saw the Magna Carta, it was in an open room like this. It was protected. It was under a special UV glass
Sure.
and inside. But that document's
still
hundreds
have
of years
it?
older. Oh yes, the original is there. It was in a church. I went to some church, didn't even know it was there, and they wanted $15 to get in. I said, I want to pay $15 to go in a church. They better have the real Magna Carta here. They said, we do. And they did. It was really a very, very.
Oh, when you got
historic.
time, you know what you got to do is go up to, if you're ever up in Pittsburgh,
Yep.
they've got the original documents. They had it on display last summer when I was up there. When they had their own
When they seceded from the they got the plaque there.
From New Hampshire.
Yeah.
They were like a separate.
They had their own country, and
No
there's
kidding.
a plaque right as you go through Pittsburgh. You can see the plaque, where where
Wow.
it started, where they fought.
No
It was
kidding.
issue. Yeah.
And there weren't enough people up there to fight for. You know what I mean? What are you
No,
going to do?
there's a lot of New Hampshire history that people are. Do you know where the Revolutionary War began? Where the first confrontation with the British began?
Portsmouth.
It was a year exactly. It was a year and a half before Lexington and Concord.
No
it
kidding.
happened at Fort William and Mary, where there were only 8 British guards there, and the 200 townspeople stormed it and took all of their ammunition and their
Cannons and
weapons and
everything
ammunition. Yeah,
Huh.
yeah. That was the first, and that was a year and a half prior to the Battle of Lexington and Concord.
I had no idea.
But it's never mentioned about. I've written letters into the History Channel saying you should talk about this. When you talk about your history, bring that up.
yeah.
We will. And that's,
Now, is there any? One of my grandkids asked me, and I said I didn't really know. Was there any? Like we always hear the battles of Massachusetts and New York and obviously down south. What battles actually took place in New Hampshire itself or inland? Let's say.
to my knowledge, William and Mary and Portsmouth are the only ones I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Well, Michelle Bachmann claims that. Well, never mind.
No.
Everyone knows that joke.
I know we had one in Ware, New Hampshire, because this is kind of funny because it was.
Where?
Yeah.
Oh.
Everyone knows that joke too.
Because when we were trying to take Suter's house a few years ago,
Yep.
one of the cool things was Lisa Wilbur is a libertarian in town, okay?
Yep.
Not a free stater. She's been up there, I think, as long as I've been up there, and if not longer. But she lives in the house where there was a meeting house or rooming house type of thing, and we used to have the king's trees and the regular trees. The king's trees
Yep.
were specially marked because they were big enough and tall enough, and they could be used for mass.
Right.
And they were kind of
Excess of 6 inches in diameter,
Right.
like the State House floors.
and so the king's trees were specially marked, and you weren't allowed to cut them.
Penalty of death.
Huh?
Penalty of death.
Penalty of death.
Yep.
And so the tax collectors came up to the mills up in Ware and found a few of those being processed, let's say. And so the next time the tax guys came up, the boys from Ware grabbed them because they knew they were going to get arrested or something like that. So in the middle of the night, they took them out of their beds. They tarred, they feathered them, they clipped the horse's mane and sent them back out of town.
Wow.
It's called the Pine Tree Rebellion.
Yeah, no, that happens. We have a lot of history like that.
Yeah.
We actually, when you walk into the Hall of Flags, those flags aren't older than the 1860s. We have 2 flags from the Revolutionary War, but they're not in the Hall of Reps.
Really?
No, they're actually over in archives, and they were lost for years. One was captured in the Battle of Bennington, I believe, and it was
Which was when? In Civil War?
Battle of Bennington, no, in the Revolutionary War.
Oh, okay.
And what happened was, if you got to talk to the curator, that around 1900, a philanthropist from New Hampshire was over there, and the descendant of the commanding general that captured the flag had the flag in their attic, and he bought them, and he brought it back to New Hampshire around 1900, those flags. So now, if you go over to archives, you can see those 2 early flags. They're the earliest flags known for New Hampshire, and they're over in the archives, while the Civil War flags and the beyond are all here, where we are. So.
I've actually always seen all those flags in the Hall of Flags, and I've never. My eyes aren't so good, so reading all those plaques is.
I've read them all many times.
Really?
Every one of them has a bullet hole in them. If you look
Really?
back, you can see blood stains on many of them, too, and you can see where they start to disintegrate. And the concern is that if they were ever to open the cases, the cloth would just fall and disintegrate down.
Really?
Yeah, there's no way really to preserve it, to preserve the...
There's no way to upgrade
Those flags are slowly deteriorating over time. Within a century, some of them will be on the floor.
Yeah.
They'll fall through. There's no way to go further preserve those. So.
There's really no way to keep them. What?
Well, if you notice now, even the railings, you used to be able to walk up and touch the railings, but now you can't even touch the railings because they're
really?
afraid that vibration or something is going to cause them, will just cause them all to fall.
Wow.
They're very delicate things, and they're a real treasure that we have.
Wow.
Many people think the portraits that are up throughout the State House are also invaluable, and they're not. Actually, they're not worth as much as the frames. The frames are
really?
worth much more than the
no
pictures
way.
themselves.
Huh,
Yeah, well, the oldest one being 1697, which is Dudley. I forget, Governor Dudley, I guess, or at the time, too. It's in the Executive Council chambers, and there are a few others. And actually, those plaques that were put on have been
Those are
put up
recently.
since you and I have served.
Yeah.
We're added in to talk about the history of each of them.
Well, one of them was actually kind of funny because I think it was. I might have this wrong. At the governor's office is here, and I think it was like the second one over. And I'm reading a few of them because those are nice and big, so I can
Yes.
see them easy, And I started looking at it. It was like, and I probably have the numbers wrong, but it was born in 1780 and died in 1925. And I said, wait a second.
That doesn't matter.
So it was the guy was 160 or something. I forget what the numbers were, but the guy was, if you look at the plaque, he was 160 when he died. I go, hey, maybe that's wrong. I went back recently, and I think they fixed it, but.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of interesting things in that State House, where, of course, it's the oldest State House still where the chambers are in continuous use. Mass has their State House actually has the chambers that were before the New Hampshire, but they don't use it in continuous use. The rooms are still there.
Yeah, they just get their legs shaved in there and stuff like that.
Oh, they get a lot of stuff that we don't get. You walk in the back, they have wonderful catered meals in the back with valets there, and they hold the vote up, and and we have a
way.
water cooler in New Hampshire. There's a big difference in New Hampshire. And actually, I guess the Massachusetts building isn't even subject to right to know. There's $100 million is spent in that one building. We're very different, New Hampshire, where things are run. Our State House is nothing like that.
Yeah, we were talking about the show. I think we had Bill O'Brien on last summer, I think.
Yeah.
And
that
we were
was an
talking
early
about
one.
with his first year, and I'm not sure if any other state's done it, but we actually have the entire budget online now.
Yes, we do.
you know, which
We
is,
spent a lot of time on that budget. You know, we got criticized by the other party, the Democrats, but we spent, and I've been on Ways and Means since it was formed in 2001. We spent more time and accuracy on those numbers than any other year we've ever done.
Really?
And they're showing we're almost right on the money for it. We couldn't anticipate,
Wow.
you know, the Fed case with Medicaid and some of the changes, but, you know, I think the members of the committee did a great job.
were you in office last term too, right?
Yep.
Were you on Ways and Means?
Oh, yeah. We lost everything 9 to 11. We passed
Really?
every single revenue bill you could imagine.
Now,
9 to 11. Passed every
while
one.
you're here, explain the difference, because earlier this year, beginning of last year, the budget's weird. It works like this. Ways and Means comes up with a number of what we believe the state will make.
Okay.
Then Finance uses that number to decide what the budget will be. So
Yeah.
Ways and Means is the one of projecting revenue for a year.
We'll tell you what you got to work with.
Okay.
Now, remember, you're thinking about when Representative Eaton got up at the
No, we're talking
podium and
about
said,
last term,
Right.
the complete different
Approach to the-
approach to this. What's the difference between last term and this?
well, that's what I'm getting. I remember Representative Eaton, Dan
Yeah.
Eaton, getting up there and say, how can we know what to set the taxes on? We haven't decided how much we want to spend yet. You know, it was a completely reversal of things.
Right.
You know, everybody watching here, you make a certain amount of money, and what you have, that's what you got to spend.
Right,
You know, that's what it is.
exactly, yeah.
No, I think I'll decide all the things I want, I'll add them all up, and now we're just going to pass laws to pay for all of it.
Right. Yeah.
And that was the difference between the two. You know, that's the difference between living within your means and going beyond that.
Yeah.
What's the difference between last term, Ways and Means projected revenue, as opposed to how much it actually received compared to this year? And
We were off by double digits under different 2 years ago, 2 or 3
so
years
like
ago.
like how much?
We were off
20%?
by over 10%. We were way off.
Yeah.
What we did was we had to make the numbers fit. So we know how much the governor was going to spend, what the budgets were. So everything was high, and we lost there was 9 to 11, right down in almost every vote. 9 Republicans, 11 Democrats. They win. That's how much the revenues come in, and we were way off, which is what started way off in the deficit this year.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't do any of that. We had no targets. The way that it was done, and kudos to our chairman for doing it this way. Everybody an opportunity to give their opinion about it, talk about what the revenues, bring in the experts, you know, from Boston, the Fed, and everything, talk about where the interest rates are going, all the business. And we've got a lot of good caliber people in that committee too. A lot of good business people that are more savvy than we ever were a couple of years ago, and they were just, you know, we did without knowing what we have to end up with. This is what we got, and we sent it off to finance, and they, you know, to their credit, they worked within their means.
Now, you also lowballed a lot of the projections. Like last time, they would look at, you know, the revenues could be coming between 10 and 20%, like say on the cigarette tax above. You guys say, well, we're going to plan on, you know, no increase and things like that all the way along, and all the revenue estimates. So.
Well, we were conservative because most of the experts that we had from the Fed, Washington, you know, people that we brought in, these experts are giving us economic indicators. They were all telling us that, you know, the real estate market's doing this. You know, this is what's happening in the business sector.
Yeah.
You know, all the things in manufacturing, what's going on. You know, and we based them on that. And all of them mentioned that most of those sectors were all going to be flat.
Yeah.
So we were, you know, conservative on us. Now, we got accused of being artificially low in some things. We weren't. We gave an honest opinion of what we thought those would be. And here's the interesting part. We took over 1,661 opinions. In other words, of all the members, the chairman would say, how many think this is it? How many think that? Raise your hands.
Yeah.
Out of those, they only dissented 5 times on committee out of 1,600.
Wow.
So for the Democrats to come back afterward and say, no, you artificially manufactured those, was completely disingenuous and totally partisan.
Yeah.
It was not. It should never have been done.
Yeah, Mike, because I just remember last year the Democrats were absolutely livid because you guys were saying, no, you're projecting this and there's no way we're going to get this much money, and, you know, their argument was, you know, basically we want more money for all these programs, so therefore you have to project.
Right.
we're gonna
Right,
get
right.
them.
Right.
Yeah.
There's also a fundamental philosophy difference between them and us at the time, and there still is, and that is that we want to lower these taxes. We want to bring in more people to pay the tax.
Right.
That's our objective as a Republican agenda on our committee. We want to make it so that New Hampshire is open for business. We want you to come here.
Right.
We want startup business. We want to make it easy to start up. We don't want to penalize you for starting up.
Right.
So we're changing all these laws to make it easier for them to do business. And it's working. Fidelity's coming back. I mean,
Yeah.
we're making good progress. And of course, the vice president was over to talk about the new manufacturing jobs we created in Rochester. I mean, we did a lot of things to make it more business friendly.
Right.
The philosophy 3 years ago, the vice chairman even had a joke up on the thing saying, "Oh, you want more revenue? Just lower taxes." Very funny. You do get more revenue if you can do that. If you can make more people come in and pay lower taxes,
Right, yeah.
you can get more money from those people. But to them, it was not only was it alien to them, it was ludicrous. It was a joke
Yeah.
to do that. So and their attitude was, if you can't afford the taxes in New Hampshire, then what are you doing here? Get out of here.
Right.
And that's not what we're saying. We don't want you out of here. We want you to come here. We want you to stay here.
The New Hampshire advantage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We want to do things that are going to create jobs. We want to make it attractive for you to do that.
Exactly.
And all that while we still had to cut $742 million out of the budget.
Yeah.
I went to a meeting down at Lincoln Institute where it was run by Democrats, and they were complaining about we should be bonding things now. Now's the time to borrow money and bond because bond prices are so cheap.
Yeah.
You can borrow money and issue a bond at 2-3%, and now's the time to bond. And I said, well, and finally, after an hour listening to it, I said, great, should we have bonded operating costs? Because that's what we did 2 years ago. We bonded that's like using your Visa to pay your mortgage.
Right,
We
right.
We borrowed to pay for our regular operating costs. You can't operate that way.
When
Yeah.
that wasn't enough, they were borrowing to pay our
Right, it
operating
wasn't-
costs.
yep.
That wasn't enough.
That wasn't enough, right?
That wasn't enough. So, and Frank will attest to this. Every week there was 3 or 4 more fees.
Yep.
They never called them taxes.
Yeah, I remember you talking about the
Right.
fees. Yeah.
And then that still wasn't enough. So there was this money from the doctors had pooled their money to create a
risk pool.
a fund.
Yep.
So doctors
Malpractice
could,
fund.
Malpractice
That
fund.
had $200 million in it.
So doctors could afford to go up into Burlington or Berlin and places off in the woods to practice
Yeah.
because they were pooling their money to pay for the insurance.
Yeah.
And somehow the Democrats thought that was theirs too.
Yep, that's ours. We'll take it.
We gotta
We got to wrap
gotta
up.
wrap.
Frank, it's been a pleasure.
My
serving
apologies
with
for
you.
being late. It's
And
always
okay.
a great time
It's been
being
a very.
here.
It's been a pleasure serving
this
with
has
you
been
over
great.
the last
Enjoy
10+ years, and you're a good guy. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And have a good night. Oh, next week it's going to be scary. There's going to be Boy Scouts here.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, it's going to. Well, I think they're. What are the little ones? Not Cub Scouts. What are you, little Tiger Scouts?
Oh, okay.
So there's going to be tigers in the studio next week.
Oh
so,
my goodness.
Yeah.
All right.
Have a good weekend. Have a good weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Go Patriots!